Y'all want to know why 13% of the population is responsible for upwards to 50% of the violent crimes in America? It's because of this.
Oftentimes, we've even found as legislators, when we go into these courts, the term violent crime is even used when people are stealing packages. Violent crime is even used when people are accused of burglary and there happens to be a housing unit in that same dwelling. So violence is an artificial construction. And we have to be very...
Violence is an artificial construction.
Clear that what is happening here with these district attorneys, that is violence. That is violence of the high.
So what is happening with these district attorneys is violence. It's kind of like that thing of, words are violence, not actual violence. Blowing up a Tesla is not, an act of terror, right? Your words are terror. Your breath is likely terror. I'm just saying. Keep your hygiene up. So that is a statement from none other than Lord Zohran Mamdani himself, America's favorite jihadist communist. And I just thought, let me go ahead and read a little portion from this book right here. I'm getting all the way. I'm talking about forehead deep in this one. This is Thomas Sowell's Black Rednecks and White Liberals. So let me go ahead and read a portion and then I'll give context as to why I'm reading it. So the portion is titled White Liberals, or the section. So this reads, white liberals in many roles as intellectuals, politicians, celebrities, judges, teachers have aided and abetted the perpetuation of a counterproductive and self-destructive lifestyle among black rednecks. Which is basically like ghetto blacks, quote unquote. The welfare state has made it economically possible to avoid many of these painful consequences of this lifestyle that forced previous generations of blacks and whites to move away from the redneck culture and its values. Laxed law enforcement has enabled the violent, well, that's just a construct, of course, and criminal aspects of this culture to persist, and non-judgmental intellectual trends have enabled it to escape moral condemnation as far back as 1901, W. Du Bois, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the reason I bring that up, even though this man that you see in front of you here is definitely not what we would consider a white liberal, he would be considered as a full-blown far leftist, quote-unquote progressive, but he has the same ideology. And that ideology states the following. When it comes to a certain group of people, whether it be quote unquote black people, brown people, whatever it is, right? They cannot be held accountable for their own actions because they have been enslaved, colonized, persecuted, marginalized, etc., etc. Therefore, if they are committing crimes disproportionately, then surely it must be the crime that is the problem. Get what I'm getting at right now. The law is the problem. And so you get what we had in California, where I was raised, in the playground where I spent most of my days. Chill out, max, relax, all cool. In California, you had these lax laws on crime, soft on crime as they called them, where you could run up in any store and steal $950 worth of merchandise without a slap on the damn wrist. They just let you go, essentially, to the point where you had stores not only, closing up sections, but just closing and moving the hell out the neighborhood to begin with. You had to go and ask to open up the cabinet where you would get your Gillette razors and all sorts of stuff. Potato chips. If you wanted the Doritos, the cheesy Doritos, original, you had to ask somebody in the front if they could open it for you, and they likely would have to walk you to the front just to make sure that you don't steal it. But as long as we're not discriminating, and, he says, Brother Thomas Sowell says something extremely interesting in that, which is this actually enables the behavior, but it also keeps those people stuck in those same loops. It's the same thing with a child. A child who is raised without consequence in the home. And I'm not saying you got to wail on your kids like a damn psychopath, but if you do not have real life consequences for your child, then they will perpetuate those same behaviors. They will continue to get away with those same behaviors. and then they'll have to deal with it in the real world. And if the real world is no longer giving them consequences, then their bad behavior will continue. People will get hurt as a consequence of it, even if it's economically. I did a story not too long ago of an Asian shop owner who was in the middle of, I believe, Oakland or one of these cities up in the Bay Area. And he got wiped for like $200 and something thousand worth of merchandise in a single day. Like he just like the inability to recover sort of wipe out. And he was still asking himself, but do I leave or do I stay in this community? And, those looking from the outside would say, well, if he leaves, he's a racist. No, if he leaves, he has an inkling of intelligence, just a fraction of intelligence. We love to talk about this idea of, well, the reason why they're committing the crimes is because of poverty. They don't have much. But when you actually start to look at the true correlation, you realize that no, poverty is oftentimes a byproduct of a culture that is okay with those sort of lax mentalities. And there are many in poverty, like, let's get this straight. There are many who are in quote unquote poverty who don't steal, don't rob, don't take people's lives, etc. So let's not discredit them first and foremost. There are many people who grow up in poverty or in just very poor environments, third world countries, etc., who don't act in that way. So it's culture. It's always culture. Now they say, well, again, it's like they need to eat. Most of these people are not stealing because they need to eat. They're not taking, as you said, your Amazon package. They didn't take your Amazon package because they were hungry. They took it because they're greedy as hell and they have no moral compass. They took it because they're entitled and they believe, well, it's just another whitey. Why does it matter anyway? They took it because they're enabled. Like a badass kid. They're enabled. Oh, they steal the candy. You don't say anything. Don't do anything about it. You don't set a precedent. They do it again, do it again, do it again. I had a homeboy like that. He is no longer alive. He lost his life to an overdose. He was always stealing. Mom would get called. Grandma would get called. Sometimes he gets caught up and, grandma would give it to him the best, but no real consequences until you end up in a cemetery too young. So real life consequences. But yet we have, again, those so-called politicians pushing for this. And you think to yourself, oh, well, maybe they just care so much about humanity. Maybe they just have such big hearts. They have hearts for the people. They can't help but just, do what is best for everybody, even if that means rehabilitating our criminals. I mean, this guy literally wants to release prisoners from prison. And he believes that that's going to be some sort of revolutionary act that's going to take the criminality out of these people. And I used to have some of those inklings, and then I turned 7, right? I used to hold some of those same beliefs. Maybe if we just help them the best, then they wouldn't do what they're doing. Maybe they just need a hug. Yeah, tell that to the psychopath who lit a woman on fire in a New York City subway. Tell that to the old man who was shanked by a man who had been arrested more than 60 times prior and was let out of prison again and again. Tell those people about just give them a hug, give them a nice warm bath, put them in a place to stay. This is something a lot of people don't like to confront, but, well, first of all, most crimes, especially heinous crimes, are committed by a smaller group. So the best thing you can do is to round them up and throw their asses in jail. But also, a lot of the homeless population, especially those who are, considered dangerous, etc., who you see on the streets are addicts and mentally ill. And many of the mental illnesses are brought about by addictions. And this is coming from a former addict. I'm not here to persecute or, to belittle, demean or anything like that. I came from that lifestyle. I done lost people I love to that way of life. And one thing I know for sure is at the end of the day, nobody can change that besides the person themselves. Where I last lived, when my folks were living, they had this program for the homeless. They built a multi-million-dollar complex or took a hotel and refurbished it for the homeless. And what you found was the place was under 20% occupancy because the rules were you had to be cleaned of the drugs that you were using in order to get a place to stay. Many of the people who could be staying there did not want to clean off of those drugs. If they can't take drugs in that building, they don't want to be in there. That's called a choice. As difficult as it may be to have to step away from that and, let God handle that basically, or let the criminal defense system handle that. for some of these individuals who are dangerous in society. The crimes are not going to go down because you want them to and because you feel sorry for these people. They're going to go down because you are hard on crime. You have consequences for criminals, and you do your best to uplift the whole, right? Like rise the boat, the entire boat. I forget what the analogy is, like a high tide rises the whole boat or whatever the hell. But basically, yes, you want to create a society where more and more people are well off. But that happens also when you punish those who are not becoming a part of that fold. Those black rednecks, as they say, those who took on the redneck culture that now we see as a ghetto culture, what is seen as quote unquote black culture or mainstream black culture. If that was shunned and ostracized as it was in many places in the North, you know, as it was in New England, and that sort of mentality of the W.E.B. Du Bois and these kind of individuals, what you would have is you would have a cleansing of that. You would eradicate those aspects and you would promote for the best aspects. But instead, it's bad whitey. Whitey's a problem with everything. I don't want his culture. Western culture's trash, blah, blah, blah. And then they go ahead and just, you know, take on the culture of 21 Savage or something like that. These are the facts. You may not like it. You may feel some type of way about it, but these are the factuals. So, yeah, that's all I got for y'all today. But continue to stand up for the truth. That's my message when it's all said and done. Stand up for it. And the truth is oftentimes uncomfortable because just because it's the truth doesn't mean most people are abiding by it, right? We've seen that too many times in history. Just because it's true doesn't mean everybody is on board with it. And it takes a brave few to stand in the truth, for the truth, with the truth, in order for that truth to permeate the rest of society. And then we can get our culture or society back. And then we can get back to just regular old sanity, and the insane can be on the fringe. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Now, if you'd like to stay around, make sure to click that little subscribe button down there, or you can show some love by going to the description below and clicking on the button titled Buy Me a Coffee. Leave a little something there, or click on the Cash App. Leave a little something here. Till the next time, peace.
I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 3-6-5, that's a full rotation. I see you looking up, you know them constellations. Constantly gazing like house of praises, you get to praising.